I don't know, should we wait a few minutes for more people to join? We're up to like 18, or should we just honor the time and get started?
Let's do.
Yeah, why don't we get started? This is our monthly member meeting, and of course it's on Zoom, and we have a great program. I'm really looking forward to this, and I'm going to let our program chair, Don White, take it from here. Thanks,
Thank
everybody, for coming.
Okay, well, hello, everybody. I'll come back in here. It's my pleasure today to welcome back an old friend to RAPS, Christine Meadows, the director of the opera program, and to introduce you to Chuck Dillard, who is the music director of the opera program and her colleague. So you know that Christine graduated from Portland State and then went on to get a Master of Music degree in vocal performance from Indiana University. And after a successful career as an opera and concert soloist, she came back to Portland State in the music department, and now she's the vocal area coordinator in the School of Music and Theater. And by the way, in 2017, she was named the Ballin Professor of Voice. Chuck Dillard came to Portland State 5 years ago to create the graduate program in collaborative piano. He has a Doctor of Musical Arts degree from the University of Colorado at Boulder. And in 2017, he founded Queer Opera Experience. He's the current director. It's housed at Portland State. And the opera program and Queer Opera Experience are collaborating this year on the production that Christine and Chuck are going to be telling us about. And I see that we have some of the talented opera students that we are going to hear from as well. The opera is John Carlo Menotti's comic opera, The Old Maid and the Thief. And there are two very different productions of this, but I'm going to let the people involved tell us how it came together, and then we will hear some voices too. So Christine and Chuck, I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you so much, and thanks for inviting us again. We always look forward to doing this every year with this group, and you guys have just been so supportive of the opera area. I am so grateful for that. I'm retiring in June, and I'm just have been really thinking about all the people that have been so supportive since I have been in this job. And most of you know, when you're passionate about your work and you work hard and are dedicated and to something like education and music, and having other people that support what you're doing can be so meaningful. And so anyway, I just wanted to thank you all for that. It has been quite a year, as you all know. The opera area last winter, we prepared an opera. The students learned all of their music. Chuck did music coachings all last winter term. We built a set, we built costumes and got props and did a lighting design and advertised, and then we had to cancel our spring production of The Merry Wives of Windsor. And all of us have been, since that time, learning online and teaching online. It's been really an interesting experience, and I've learned a great deal from it. And actually been really so amazed at how effective teaching online can be. I think we've all learned a lot about that kind of communication. I've learned some technology, as resistant as I have been, I've had to. And been really surprised. It very mixed. Some students struggle more with not being in person than others. But really some of the great results of teaching voice and coaching on like this. And of course, the very difficult thing is musicians, collaborating is a huge part of what we do. And when you do that, you're making music and feeding off of each other in the moment. And that's something that we are really missing. So that's what we're really looking forward to being able to do again in the future. our for the fall this year, we had planned to do a new opera. We've been trying to do a lot of new operas in the fall, and we planned to do a new piece by Bonnie Miksch, our director, the director of the School of Music, who's an amazing composer, and she's also a singer. So she's been wanting to write an opera for some time, but that got postponed, of course, because of COVID. And so I was really, really grateful when Chuck approached me and said, um, why doesn't Queer Opera Experience and PSU Opera do a joint production this year? Something that we can do virtually and do it under COVID safe conditions. And he suggested we do The Old Maid and the Thief, which seemed like it could be conducive to that situation. And it also was good for, it has a lot of the roles that we had students that needed that experience doing an opera could fill. So we went forward, and it's been a great experience. Has been a huge challenge. It's taken not twice as long as we thought it would, but just about, because we've run into all kinds of things, obstacles, and but we're making good progress, and I'll let Chuck fill you in on where we are in the process. But I wanted to tell you some about this opera. It's written by the composer John Carlo Menotti, who called himself an American composer, but he actually also was an Italian citizen. He is probably recognized as the most important American opera composer, I would say, in the generation after World War II. He in that time, most composers were exploring atonality as far as harmony, not writing in any certain key, and they were doing opera that we called through composed, where the music just keeps going and evolving, it doesn't stop. Menotti really pretty much rejected those ideas and really wanted to continue on the Italian opera tradition of like Puccini or Mascagni. And he wrote in keys, and his music has a very expressive lyricism that we associate with those composers. He also is very particular about how he sets language, in that it has a natural rhythm to imitate the language, and a real clear emotional intensity in his work that we think of when we think of Puccini. He also wrote his own librettos, which is pretty unique. Most opera composers don't do that. And I always really appreciate Menotti because he wrote a lot of leading roles for mezzos. Most composers tend to put the soprano in the lead role. And I've had the pleasure of singing quite a few of his roles, the Medium and the Old Maid and the Mother in Amal, probably his most famous opera, his Christmas opera. He was born in Italy and was born into a fairly wealthy family, and so he had a lot of opportunities. His family moved to Milan when he was quite young, and so he was able to go to La Scala and see a lot of opera. He had a lot of exposure and was able to have some education in the conservatory there, and then he enrolled in Philadelphia at the Curtis Institute of Music when he was 17. And that's where when you read about him, they talk about he was kind of spoiled and got away with a lot and didn't ever have to work very hard until he got to Curtis, and he was forced to work very hard there. And that's also where he met his longtime partner, the biggest love interest of his life, Samuel Barber, who's also a composer of great vocal music, my favorite American songwriter. And he actually wrote the librettos for some of Samuel Barber's operas. Um, he wrote more than 24 operas, and two of his operas actually received Pulitzer Prizes, The Consul and The Saint of Bleecker Street, which both had long, very successful runs on Broadway. Actually, I don't think we've had a successful run on Broadway for an opera in a long time. That's kind of interesting that his shows were. His first opera that was really successful was called Amelia, and his first mature opera that he wrote after he attended Curtis. It was called Amelia Goes to the Ball, and it was performed by members of the Curtis Institute. But it was so successful, this was in 1937, that in 1938 the Metropolitan Opera produced this opera. It was just a huge success, and the NBC, the National Broadcasting Company, commissioned him to write an opera for the radio. And he wrote The Old Maid and the Thief. That's where this opera comes from. He later adapted this piece so that it could be performed on the stage. It has 14 scenes, and each of them is preceded by a narration and a narrator and making an announcement. And so you even if it's produced on stage, you still get that radio feel from this piece. It has two very famous arias in it that you're going to hear today, Steal Me Sweet Thief and When the Air Sings of Summer. These both have become standard repertoire for sopranos and baritones and really acknowledged as some of the greatest arias ever written. There's a quote from this opera, and it's that one of the characters says, and it's, "The devil couldn't do what a woman can, make a thief out of an honest man." And I think I like that quote because it sort of says what this piece is about a little bit. It is a comedy, and it's the story of an old maid, a kind of a busybody in a small town. She has a maid who is deathly afraid of becoming an old maid like her employer. And she has a friend who's the town gossip, Miss Pinkerton. And one day a beggar comes to their back door. And the maid and Miss Todd are so taken by the good looks and manner of this beggar that they invite him in for dinner, and then they invite him to spend the night. And the opera is pretty much about how all the things that they do to try to get this beggar to stay at their house as they both fall in love and have visions of what their lives will be like with this person. At the same time, it becomes known that a thief, a prisoner, has escaped from a nearby prison and happens to fit the description of this beggar that they're keeping hidden at their house. And in spite of that, they're both so taken with this person that they do everything, including steal, in order to talk him into staying at their house. I'm not going to tell you how it ends up because I want you to find that out when you watch it, when we stream it this spring. But it really is quite a great story, and Menotti is wonderful with characters, and it's really great. So anyway, I'd like to introduce you to our students, and I've asked them to share with you. I have two people singing for you, and then I asked one of our students just to talk about the experience and what it's been like preparing and doing an opera this way. It's been a really interesting learning experience for everybody. So we're going to start with Abigail Marine, who's going to, I'll let her tell you what she's going to do.
Hi there, everyone. So yeah, my name's Abigail Marine. I'm a third year music education student at good old PSU. And as an aspiring music teacher, I do just want to start by saying that I am so proud to be performing for so many dedicated educators, because you guys are the ones that make opportunities like the Old Maid and the Thief possible and readily available for students like me and like Wyatt and like Austin. So I really am thankful to be able to perform for all of you today. So speaking of the Old Maid, that is why we're here, right? Nah, I'm just kidding. Because not only did it give me the chance to continue doing what I love to do despite the limitations of COVID, but I also feel like it made me a significantly better musician and actress. With that being said, I think the hardest part of the whole process, and Christine touched on this, was not having your co-actors and actresses in the same room with you to play off of each other's body language and, you know, overall mood for the scene. And there were times where I would be portraying myself with a really extreme emotion. For example, I would look really angry at Bob for not, I don't know, falling in love with me instantly. And that's when our staging director would have to jump in and be like, okay, maybe, you know, take it down a bit, because not, you know, your co-actors are not quite on that same level just yet. And, you know, that is something that I struggled with, but it just took a lot of rehearsing and memorizing, and eventually we all got it to the point where it actually seemed like we were in the same room together and we were creating beautiful music all together. And that was just a really cool process to experience and see firsthand being played out. So this room that you see behind me is where I did about 90%, I would say, of the preparation that was necessary for the show. I did my music rehearsals as well as staging rehearsals, all from the comfort of this little hut type place that I'm living in right now. But I think I only left my house about like 6 or 7 times. And that was for the mock recordings as well as the actual recordings themselves. And it meant so much to me that the directors of this production were so diligent with keeping in line with COVID precautions, because as someone who lives with 2 high-risk parents, it just really meant a lot to me that I wasn't putting my loved ones at risk for to do something that I love to do. So I got to do something that I love to do, and also you know, keep my family safe. So that really meant a lot. And I am not exaggerating when I say that there was every COVID precaution taken necessary for this production to become what it became. In the show, I portrayed the character of Letitia. That's her name, and she is the housekeeper to the actual old maid of the show. Her name's Miss Todd. So Letitia is very quick to set her eyes on Bob, who's the beggar, and dream up this very elaborate plan of him taking her away and taking her away from her boring small town life and showing her the excitement of being a beggar and a wanderer. And that's sort of when Letitia's aria, that's titled "Steal Me, Sweet Thief," comes into play. Excuse me. Letitia, in this piece, Letitia's kind of having an existential crisis. She works for this old maid who's kind of bitter and a gossip, and she doesn't do much, and she doesn't have someone to love her, and she's scared that she might turn out the same way. And she feels like her time is running out, and that sooner than later, she won't be worthy of love anymore. And her closing line in this song is, "Oh, steal me, for time's flight is stealing my youth." She just wants this man to give her a new life and save her from this impending doom of dying sad and alone. And I think, in a way, this is something that we can all resonate with, especially after facing this pandemic, in the sense that being deprived of human connection is a difficult reality to face. And in the end, we all just want to feel loved and cared for by somebody. But yeah, so overall, this was such a fun production to be a part of. And even though none of us have seen the final product yet, I just know that this is going to be such a unique and very compelling production that features the talent of so many hardworking individuals. So I really hope that you all will tune in and watch it when it is released. And I'm not sure, do I perform now? Okay, perfect. And without further ado, I will sing my aria.
Medium. Connected to purely that word.
Yes, all right. Technology, love it. Okay, let me just set up my little area. This was definitely a big part of the rehearsal process as well, so you guys get to witness that too. All right. All right, let me start that over, sorry. What a curse for a woman is a timid man. A week has gone by, he had plenty of chances, but he made no advances. Miss Todd schemes and labors to get him some money. She robs friends and neighbors, the club and the church. He takes all the money with a smile that entrances, but still makes no advances. The old woman sighs and makes languid eyes. All the drawers are wide open, all the doors are unlocked. He neither seems pleased nor shocked. He eats and drinks and sleeps. He talks of baseball and boxing. But that is all. What a curse for a woman is a timid man. Steal me, oh steal me, sweet thief, for time's flight is still lips, still my heart, still my cheeks, still, oh, still my breath, and make me die before death will steal her from me. Oh, steal me. 4 times flight is stealing my youth. Thank you so much, everyone. Such a delight to perform for all of you.
Beautiful, Abigail.
Thank you.
That was really great. Okay, so you get the feeling of how you can compare his work to Puccini and that kind of lyricism that aria shows it so clearly. The next student that is going to talk, I asked Wyatt Jackson, Chuck's going to tell you more about this in a few minutes, but we actually did 2 productions with 2 casts. And so we had a Miss Todd and we also had a Mr. Todd. And Wyatt played Mr. Todd. And I've actually, he doesn't really have an aria to sing from the opera that's, he has a kind of a scrambly thing at the end of the opera, but it's not really much of an aria. So, but he's so articulate. So I asked him just to tell you a little bit about how this was different, this process, than the way we normally do an opera, and what were the kinds of things that he could learn from that. Wyatt?
Thank you, Christine. My name is Wyatt Jackson. I'm a second-year graduate student here at PSU in vocal performance. Yes, as everyone has been saying, the process has been very different from how we would normally go about starting an opera and performing one. The beginning, it felt pretty similar. We got our music and we began learning our notes and rhythms and our words and everything like that. But from there, it became more and more different and in some ways more and more strange, but also uniquely challenging and in a lot of ways inspiring to see our art form continue so successfully during such challenging circumstances. So some of the things that we went through in this process that Abigail touched on a little bit and Christine did as well, being coached online. And we had been doing that in our solo voice lessons with our voice teachers since the lockdown began in the spring of 2020. So we had some experience with that, which definitely helped when working on this opera, but it's definitely no replacement for working together with fellow actors and fellow performers and with Chuck in person, and especially with the director in person, the delay between feedback and the inability to reliably work simultaneously together really were the biggest challenges. We kind of had to perform a little section, wait for feedback, go back and adjust it. And it's really just you singing with a recording track one-on-one. And the recording track is nice. It does it the same every time, but you as the human element, you kind of have to play catch up and do your best to keep up with the pace that it sets for you. But I think we all did. By the end, we were all just as consistent as those robotic tracks. So that was really a fun aspect of it. And like Abigail said earlier, working without or finding acting decisions without being in the same room as someone was particularly challenging. At the end, when we were recording, we ended up setting up little stands on either side of us, outside of the view of the camera, and we drew little faces on sheets of paper to have kind of indications of where people would sit after we had finished filming, so that I would know, oh, Letitia is over there on my right, and Bob is over there on my left, so I can know to look at them, and they're there, and we had them drawn on those little sheets of paper. So that was a little fun. And then, of course, as Christine said, we had those two casts, and Chuck will explain more about that later, I'm sure. But one of the biggest challenges for me playing Mr. Todd as a kind of mirror image of Mrs. Todd was the fact that that role and that part was written by Minotti as a for a mezzo voice, and I am clearly not a mezzo voice. I'm a bass baritone, which is similar. They're both low voices in terms of soprano versus mezzo and tenor versus bass baritone. But there were some constraints that we made decisions on to adjust some of the contour or some of the notes in the music to make them a little bit more physically possible for me to do, partially due to the music itself, but also voice maturity. The role itself is written for somebody who is much older than I am. I'm only 23, and my voice has a long way to go before it's fully developed and matured. And so even if it were written for me, there would still be a lot of things that I can't quite do yet, that I'm still learning to do. But I think everyone in the production, Chuck especially, and Christine, were very helpful in making it feasible for me to perform, so that I could have this learning experience while still kind of doing our best to stay within the original vision that Minotti had for the character and for the role. Other aspects of acting without a set, without moving around on stage, we were kind of confined to our little box of the camera, which was unique in its own right, but like how we had experience with online teaching for a few months at this point, we had experience acting in these little boxes as well, because we had to do that for our voice lessons as well in our juries. And so I found it pretty similar to that. So that actually wasn't quite as bad, because we had that little tie over, some familiarity in these strange situations. The recording itself, building up to a performance of an opera where you're setting up for it, preparing for it for months and months, and then getting to perform it live on a stage has such a huge payoff and cathartic release. And I think I was worried a little bit that I might not feel the same way for recording. It kind of like, it might just feel like, oh, we went in for another rehearsal and then we're just magically done. But to me, at least, I felt a similar relief. And if anything, it felt a little bit more reassuring, because I got a few extra takes instead of doing it all in one night and maybe beating myself up over a small mistake. I got to go back and correct that mistake while recording. So that was nice. But overall, and I think this is something that is true for all of us on all sides of the production, is that it was a huge opportunity for learning, and just provided so many new angles and ideas on which to approach music and opera and acting as a whole, that I think I know I will, and I know everyone else who was involved will remember those lessons and take those new ideas that they learned from the process and use them in the future as well. So I thought it was a wonderful experience and truly amazing to be able to get to do it.
Thanks, Wyatt. One of the things that's can be challenging for young singers to learn, and I remember this for myself. Actually, for me, I didn't like singing in recitals or concert work when I was a young singer. I liked singing in operas because, and I think that's one reason I pursued opera more, was because having other people, actors to be responding to and to be working with, and sets and costumes, and it helped me to get out of my own head and become this other character. I think one of the challenging things for many young singers, is that if you sing in a concert or in a recital, that you need to become that character, even though it's just little old lonely old you standing there instead in front of an orchestra, in front of the piano, in a nice Sunday best dress. You have to become with your whole self that character, whatever their physicality is, whatever emotion they're feeling. You have to see the forest in front of you, or see the village, or the flower, the hummingbird that you're singing about. You have to see that person that you're singing to, even though they're not there. And those are skills that take a while to build, and it's easier for some young people to learn those than others. But you were kind of required, you really were required to do that in this situation. So I hope that some of the singers that help them to learn that. All right. So the next student that's going to sing for you is Austin Allen. Austin?
Hi there, everyone. I'm excited to be here today. Today I'll be singing When the Air Sings a Summer, but I first wanted to talk about the character I had the opportunity to play, Bob. And I think character work is probably one of my favorite things about opera and just theater in general. I love nerding out and just getting into those ooey gooey details about these characters and the inner workings. In the end, it's only a sliver of who they are that, bubbles to the veneer of what the audience actually sees. So I love that process of figuring out what's important about Bob, what do I want to share about Bob, and what's important to really tell the story. His relationship to the other characters. I think one of the really cool parts about the opera was that we did have two casts, and being a gay actor, I have to do a little extra acting with all my female counterparts, kissing women, being intimate, and having those moments on stage definitely takes, I have to draw from different places that maybe, I don't look at a woman the same way, a straight male would. But this was really cool because I got to play, I've decided that Bob was kind of maybe a bisexual, but I think the most important thing about his character is that he was just really open and accepting. And I think that's what was so alluring about him to both, Letitia and Mr. Todd, in this kind of fight between them two, each of them trying to find a connection with him. And what's funny about Bob is that he's really this idealist. He has these romanticized notions of nature, that he doesn't want to be tied down by anything. Kind of like a Huckleberry Finn like character, but a little more mature. He's had these experiences. You get a sense that he's had some maybe trauma in the past, and you kind of get a hint of that in the opera, but he really feels confined, like he's not really his true self when he's stuck in a home, stuck in a job. And so he chooses to be this traveling homeless, free person. And while staying with Letitia and Mr. Todd, I think he's really retracted from that feeling. And so this aria is a pivotal moment in the opera, in that he's really deciding, you know, enough with these people and money and food, like this is all great, but I really just want to return out into the wild and just be this kind of free person. But yeah, I'd love to sing the aria for you now. When the air sings of summer, I must wander again. Sweet landlord is the sky, rich house is the plain, and to live is to wander through the sun and the rain. When the air sings of summer, I must wander again. First you wander in youth and joy, then you wander to still the fears of an old heart. First you wander to find your love, then you wander to hide your tears, for a wanderer must depart. When a man owns a house, he is a bird in a cage, whose captivity pain is sweetened with age. Oh, the sharp joy of freedom is my loss and my gain. When the air sings of summer, I must wander again. Well, yes, I agree with Christine. Minotti definitely had this Italianate, grandiosa idea of opera, and it was such a pleasure, like working with everyone, with Rebecca and Chuck and Christine, you know, using her experience to lead us and guide us through the whole process. And I just had such a great time. When we got to the recording, it was just like a party. I know it was just me and Chuck and the recordings, you know, coaches and whatnot, but I really built this whole world in my mind. And yeah, I look, don't get me wrong, I can't wait to perform on stage again. But I really think that, you know, outlets like this are something that we shouldn't ignore in the future. I think that, you know, continuing to put opera on film is a great way to make it accessible for everyone. But yeah, thank you.
Chuck, would you share now?
Absolutely. First, I want to thank Austin, Abigail, and Wyatt for singing and speaking today. These are great examples of the talent that we have at PSU, and thank you guys for being so well spoken. I thought you all said exactly the right things, and I really appreciate that. And I also want to say a big thank you to Christine. She's been a big part of my 5 years at PSU, and I know we will all miss her presence in the building next year. But so thank you, Christine, for everything. I'd love to tell you just a little bit about queer opera and why we do what we do before talking about this production in particular. Queer opera started in 2017 as a way to give singers that identify as queer an opportunity to play a role that they identify with in a more authentic way. And also to tell queer stories through opera. The general traditional operatic canon is 100% heteronormative. And that does not represent the audience or the people that are on stage singing it. And so I created queer opera 4 years ago now to change that and to start to tell stories that are more representative of the 21st century. And so when COVID happened and we realized we had to cancel Merry Wives, and when I had to cancel my summer workshop, and then we had to cancel our fall production, I talked to Christine, as she said, about why don't we come together, PSU Opera and Queer Opera, and do a production of Old Maid and the Thief. Like she said, it was written for radio, and so I thought this technological convergence would work out really well. And it has a relatively small cast, only 4 singers, and there aren't very many ensembles. You can imagine if we did Le Nozze di Figaro and doing the Act 2 finale that has 10 singers singing at the same time, it would have been a nightmare. Very rarely in Old Maid and the Thief do 2 singers sing together. And so that made it seem a little bit more feasible to do this. And then we added 2 more characters as narrators. So, or 1 more character as a narrator. And then the queer opera spin on it was that we were going to have 1 cast that is a male identifying cast and 1 cast that is a female identifying cast. So originally the show has 3 women, Miss Todd, Miss Pinkerton, and Letitia, and 1 man, Bob. And because of that, it creates definite gender entrenched situations that pits men against women with certain stereotypes. And you know, that the town gossip is a female, the old maid is a female, the wandering homeless person is a male. Like, these are all very sort of easy stereotypes. And when I talked to my stage director that I work with, Rebecca Herman, we decided to, you know, let's take gender out of the equation in a way and have 1 cast be all female and 1 cast be all male. And so the creepy sort of male on female, like predatory situations, didn't necessarily exist in our casting. And like I said, it almost makes it ungendered, because it's not about gay situations or lesbian situations, it's just about human situations. And that's one of the things that I think is really important. Now, many people will look at what queer opera is doing with its recasting and say that it's a bit disrespectful or blasphemous to opera, that Menotti wrote it a certain way, Puccini wrote it a certain way, and you just don't mess with it. I understand that. And I also understand that opera needs to be flexible and it needs to grow with the times. And so that's why I believe that recasting these operas does no harm to the art form. And I believe that it really brings people into the seats of the theater eventually to see new stories being presented. So that's why I really believe in this recasting idea. So the process of creating this opera, I took a big bite, possibly more than I could chew when I started this, but I'm glad that I did. and I chewed it up and I swallowed it, and it was good in the end. But PSU put in place some COVID safety protocols that we had to abide by. When you were in the building, you had to remain masked unless you were drinking or eating. You could not, if you were, you could not stay in the same room for longer than a certain period of time without engaging the HEPA filters and de-aerosolizing the room and all of. So there were all of these barriers that we had that PSU put in place. So what we ended up doing is I created an accompaniment track that you just heard Abigail and Austin use that had a click. And the click was a virtual conductor keeping everyone in line, on beat, because it may not seem difficult to some of you, but it is astonishingly difficult to sing operatically without some other cue, visual or audible, to keep you in time. And so I gave them a practice track that I sat at my computer for several weeks and plugged every single note in for the whole show from an operatic full score, and exported that to them. And so that's what they had for months and months and months to practice with. Rebecca, the stage director, would stage them. They would have the recording. They would have her on a screen, and they would figure out who's in what place. And then we finally get to the recording session. And in the recording session, we had a camera, we had lights in their face. They're sitting in a chair for the entire situation, because as Wyatt mentioned, they have to remain in this box. So there's no moving around the room, which is very unusual. Singers like to be on their feet. So singing in a chair is a challenge. And so we would go in, we would get them set up with their costumes, with their props, make sure that the video is good. And then the audio engineer would go to her place in another room. The video engineer would go to his place in another room. I would go out the room, and then the singer could finally take their mask off. They would be fed the accompaniment through one of these earbuds, and then so they would be video recorded on one track, audio recorded on another track, and then those two tracks would be put on top of each other to make the final product. And so where we are right now is the audio has finally been edited and approved by me. It is now going to go to a video editor. And one of the interesting things about this show is, since they're in a box and they're in a chair, they can't get up and leave the room. And so this video editor, along with the help of the stage director, is going to float their little box in and float this other little box in. And maybe if they're nervous, their boxes will shake, or if they're walking away from the camera, their boxes will get smaller, and all of these fancy video effects that they're going to do. And then once that happens, then it will finally be ready for public consumption. But I've realized that this is why movies take years after the filming is done before it's finally ready for production. And they filmed for weeks. We filmed for 4 days, only 4 days, because the singers can't sing for 8 hours a day. We can't be in the room for a certain amount of time. We only had 90 minutes in the room per singer, and then we had to clear the room for half an hour, and then another singer would come in. It was a very laborious process, but as Austin has said, and the other singers as well, we learned so much. And I really hope that, I know for a fact, that they honed their acting skills, because they never, ever sang with someone else in their scene. They were always alone. And so imagine having a one-sided conversation that you have to react to, that you have to, do double takes and certain words that you have to respond to and things like that. They were across the board so superb in how they handled that. And I can't wait to see what the final product is. I hope we have time for about a 90-second audio clip. Do we have time? Great. So I do have audio, no video, sadly, of scene 4 rather, which is the scene where Miss Pinkerton comes and tells the town gossip, comes and tells Miss Todd that there's a thief loose in town. Meanwhile, this potential thief is upstairs in Miss Todd's bedroom after being invited in for the night. And the cast that you're going to hear is the male cast. So instead of Miss Todd and Miss Pinkerton, it is Mr. Todd and Mr. Pinkerton. So I will hopefully be able to share my screen, share my sound. And you'll notice a little bit into the clip, they start describing this thief who looks remarkably like Bob, who again is upstairs in the bedroom.
Mr. Todd!
Oh dear, come on. You can do it. Come on, I won't do this much longer. Okay, well, technology doesn't always work. And I'm not going to make all of you good people sit there and wait while we do that. But it is fascinating to hear this music with male voices as opposed to female voices. And I think also it changes the dynamic because it's not two women gossiping, which is sort of the traditional stereotypical sound that we have. It's two men gossiping, which absolutely happens, I can tell you from experience. And I think it's really wonderful that queer opera and PSU opera can portray stories in this way that are more universal as opposed to stereotypical. And that is where I will end. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions about the production? No? Yes, Dawn?
Do you know yet when we will be able to see this production and how it will be streamed?
That is an excellent question. It will be free online. I believe we agreed on that, right, Christine, that we're not going to sell tickets, or we'll give our lovely Raps people a link. Okay, fair enough. Don't tell anyone I said that. But it will be free online on a platform called Vimeo, which is free and universal to everyone. As far as when it will take or when it will be released, I'm not sure. Everything is taking longer than we thought. It will absolutely be released in the spring, and we will let you know as soon as we know. So, but thank you for the question.
Well, if there aren't any other questions, just I want to thank you. Oh, yes. Yes, Eileen.
I just wanted to ask Samantha, please, to tell us how you're going to provide us with the opportunity to hear this sound.
I threw it up in the chat, Chuck. I know there was some difficulty sharing that little audio file. If you want to send that over, I can always include it with the recording. of this whole presentation to send to our members. So we could
I'll
always.
absolutely do that.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you've got plans to publicize this beyond our community so that at a national level, people will know this is available.
Yeah.
Yes,
Oh, sorry. No.
yes, we do. We'll be advertising it to our community, and we're hoping we're still working with the publishers about how much it will cost in order to post this on YouTube. Yeah, that's what we'd like to do, actually. But we're running into some snags there, but we're working on it.
Thank you.
Yes, Abigail?
I just wanted to, again, thank you guys for this opportunity to perform, because not only was it such a fun, it's always so much fun to perform, but this is also the first time that I personally have heard any of the other co-actors in this show sing at all. So that was really awesome to hear Austin sing, because I haven't, I've memorized all the other people's lines and lyrics to their songs, but I've never actually heard them sing it. So it was fun for everyone, I guess.
Well, thank you all so much. It was a pleasure to be here as always, and stay well, everyone. And let's see, do you think I could have access to this recording? I'd love to have that. Thanks. Okay. I guess I'll sign it over to Steve.
Yep, this is Steve Brennan, the co-president of RAPS, and this was fantastic. I want to thank everybody who participated, especially the performers and the discussers of the challenges that you folks had to go through and your learning experience. And now I'm going to turn the mic back over to Dawn White, who's our program chair, and she has good stuff. Not that this wasn't really fantastic, but there are other programs in the works. Dawn?
Yes, I just want to tell you what's coming up with our programs. So the annual President's Luncheon for faculty and staff is not going to happen next month. It's been canceled for the second year in a row, but we still have President Percy, who's going to be talking to us, Steve Percy. And it's going to be a similar format to his presentation to us last fall. Kind of like a fireside chat. He was talking to us from his home and giving us an update on what was happening at the university. And there's certainly a lot happening at the university now, budget issues and planning issues, getting the campus open again. So we will be hearing from him next month, but the important thing is that the date and the time have been changed from the dates as published in the rap sheet. The meeting is going to be Friday, April 30th, a week later than we had planned. And because of President Percy's schedule, it will start at 11:30 a.m. rather than at noon. So this will all be reported in the next issue of the rap sheet, but please make a note of that now. And one little addition to the May program, we're going to be hearing about the Vanport, Vanport placemaking project with Mary Helen Kincaid, who's the project director. And she's actually going to be joined by Tanya March, who's the project researcher. So that's happening in May. Of course, we've canceled the ice cream social because this meeting will be held via Zoom. And we are hopeful that it will be the last program that will be held over Zoom for the foreseeable future. We are very much hopeful that our August meeting, which is always a potluck in a park, a public park, will happen. The date is Thursday, August 19th at Willamette Park. So put that on your schedule now. We will know a little bit closer to the time whether it will happen or not. But, if everybody gets vaccinated and the pandemic comes under control in the next few months, we will be looking at beginning our 2021-22 programming year in person, back on campus, being able to see each other's faces and hear each other's voices. And I just have to say that this program was so wonderful because we saw faces and we heard voices, and it wasn't like being in the same room with everybody. And yet I still got goosebumps hearing, and you still brought Charlie to tears with your beautiful voices. So we've got a good program coming up, and thank you so very much for everything that you did for this program today, Christine and Chuck and those talented students.